It was late evening when I noticed Karen fumbling at my front door. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and shadows stretched across my property. Curious and mildly amused, I watched from my porch as she tried, repeatedly, to fit her key into my lock. Of course, she had no right to be there. This was my home, my sanctuary, and yet, here she was as entitled and clueless as ever. After a few minutes of fruitless effort, she did what she always did when frustrated. She dialed 911. I could hear her from inside, talking rapidly into the phone, trying to convince the dispatcher that some emergency had occurred. I took a deep breath, deciding it was time for a little intervention. Instead of letting the call escalate, I calmly picked up my own phone and called the dispatcher directly. "Hello," I said, in a composed tone. "This is the homeowner. There is no emergency. In fact, the caller is trespassing on private property and attempting unlawful entry." The dispatcher paused for a moment, likely processing that the person reporting the emergency was actually the one causing it, and then quietly confirmed my statement. Within minutes, officers arrived, not to arrest me, but to remove Karen from my property and ensure she understood the situation. Karen was livid. She stormed around, shouting, trying to argue her way back in, but the officers, politely but firmly, kept her at bay. She had clearly underestimated not only my knowledge of the law but my connections and ability to handle any false claims she tried to file. While the officers escorted her off my property, I decided to make an example. I calmly walked to the front yard, waved at the gathered neighbors, and explained how my property rights worked. I even invited them to witness that trespassing and false emergency reports were not tolerated. Karen's face went from red to purple as she realized her plan had utterly backfired. To add a final touch of irony, I sent a polite letter to the HOA board, outlining Karen's repeated trespasses and her misuse of emergency services. Copies went to the local police department, the HOA attorney, and the community newsletter. Everyone got to see that Karen's entitled behavior had consequences, and that I was fully prepared to protect my home, legally, safely, and decisively. By the time the dust settled, Karen had been humiliated. The neighbors had learned a lesson about respect and property boundaries, and I had reinforced the unshakable truth: my home, my rules. Anyone foolish enough to test that boundary would quickly find that I had both the authority and the ingenuity to turn their arrogance into embarrassment. From that day on, Karen never tried to enter my home again, and every time the HOA mentioned her, neighbors smirked knowingly. My locks remained secure, my property unviolated, and my reputation as someone who could defend their rights, without ever raising a hand, was stronger than ever.